The following program has been pre-recorded, so please don't call in at this time. If you wish to participate in the program, tune in at 5 p.m. every Wednesday for A Pause for Thought on Baton Rouge Community Radio. Good evening, fellow humans. This is Wayne Parker with A Pause for Thought here on Baton Rouge Community Radio, 96.9 FM here in Baton Rouge. Glad to have you all with us tonight, and I'm glad to be with you. I'd like to remind all the listeners, and of course the multitudes who just tuned in, that we are a live call-in show, 343-9927, 343-9927. You may call that number anytime you like to ask questions, pose objections, challenge us, or whatever on the topic of the evening. And tonight, we have a wonderful guest, a very interesting person, Kathy Smith, who is the Director of Family Services at the Unitarian Church here in Baton Rouge, correct?
Family Ministries.
Family Ministries, service, yeah, right, sorry. It's Family Ministries, right. Hey, you're right. I remember seeing that, but anyway. And I told you I would make mistakes on the air now and then.
It's okay. We all make mistakes. It's part of being human.
Yep. If you're not making mistakes, you're not doing anything at all. So, anyhow, where do we start here? Okay, the Unitarian Church, Director of Family Services, generally what do you do as the Director of Family Ministry? Excuse me. Thank you. No, you were going to correct me, and you should. But go ahead.
I don't have to. You corrected yourself.
I know, but you were starting to. Go ahead.
The Director of Family Ministries position takes care of the religious education and faith formation of children and youth. That's been the primary drive for that particular position. We are in the process of discerning what else we want to do with it, whether it will be more fellowship events, more adult educational events, parent support kind of events. We are working on growing the position as I fit into it, because I've only been here for 11 months. So
yeah, okay. Well, the question I have, though, is, okay, religious education. Most people, or many people, might say, well, Unitarians are just a bunch of atheists. How can you teach that? Can you explain just generally what the religion is, or what the faith is, and why people would ask that, or why that is not inappropriate viewpoint or whatever?
Well, I would start by saying that Unitarian Universalism is not just a bunch of atheists, although we certainly have atheists and agnostics in our midst. We are a collection of people who may define themselves as humanist or atheist or agnostic or Christian or pagan or Buddhist, or as I do, I define myself as 100% Unitarian Universalist. We are a progressive liberal faith that is brought together primarily by a combined set of values that we share and a way of being in the world. We believe that love is the greatest power of all, that we are called to live by the power of love, and that what love calls us to do is build the beloved community here on earth, meaning if anybody's going to make this world a better place, human beings are the vehicle that we have to work through, and
okay,
we work together to do that.
What do you mean by progressive liberal faith, though? Are you talking politically?
No, we tend to attract a largely progressive political crowd, but we are certainly not limited. There are people in our congregations who define themselves as conservative through liberal politically. What I talk about when I talk about liberal progressive faith, a liberal faith is one that has many sources, not just one defined source. Progressive is usually a faith that defines itself as being open to ongoing revelation.
That was something I marked here in the notes you sent me. Let's see if I can find it real quickly, and if not, talking about the spirituality of children. You mentioned here on the ongoing revelation of truth and meaning. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Correct.
Okay, so it's basically, from what I understand right now, and I'm speaking generally, what I understand right now, what I've learned and seen, based on that, this is how I think I should behave, and would like to see everyone else behave too. But that can always change if I learn more.
That is one, yeah, that's a huge piece of it.
Okay.
The other piece is human beings as a race or as a group.
Mm-hmm.
that we do not have a set of knowledge that we are limited to, that we are always learning, always growing. And that is as true spiritually as it is scientifically. There are those faiths that say, this is the world as it is, this is the absolute truth, there is no change to this. In the vernacular I was raised with, God settles it. God said it, that settles it, I believe it.
Yeah.
Unitarians are not that group of people. We are a group of people. When once the Reverend Starr King was asked, where do Unitarian Universalists stand? Or where do Unitarians stand? And the response was, we don't stand, we move. And we believe that as we learn more, we change, we grow. We also believe that the divine reveals itself to humanity, or reveals itself to us, and that our experiences and our way of moving reflect that fact, that there is no one right absolute truth about the nature of the divine or about the nature of the universe, what we call the big existential questions.
Yes. You mentioned, hopefully I can keep that thread going. You mentioned that the word religion, when I asked you to prepare for explaining how you define religion, you said that the root of the word religion is that which binds us together.
Correct.
It sounds to me like what you've described with Unitarians and Universalists. They used to be separate. That would be the case the way we view it. But are there not some religions that exclude some people, and we don't need to get specific? Are those so-called religions not necessarily binding everyone together?
I think I will try to tease that question apart. Those religions, their set of beliefs bind them together in their community, just as our set of beliefs bind us together in our community. We tend to be bound together. We don't share a common creed in the way that you can say some religions can recite a creed, this is what we believe. Unitarian Universalists are more likely to answer with the very general kind of answer that I gave you earlier, because what holds us together are the values that we share in common, the way we try to live our life, the promises we make to each other about how we will be in this world and how we will be in community with each other. And so I would hold that all religious communities have a thread that binds them together. And I would say that the thread that pulls Unitarian Universalists together as a religious faith is this sense of social justice, a sense that we are responsible for and called to create a better community, and our sense that we are responsible to respect and care for and be compassionate with our fellow human beings and the other living forms and non-living forms that we share this earth with.
Okay. And by making the community better, you mean the community of human beings, correct? It's not just
correct. It's not
community, the limited community of the church.
Correct.
Okay.
It is not just our little cluster of our little club. It is, we are here to make the world a better place for all living beings.
Right. And we do that by beating people over the head and screaming at them, or what? And I'm trying to tie this back into children's religious education in our church. Or, sorry, in your church. Too late now, but go ahead. Everybody here that listens knows where I belong. But
no. Unitarian Universalists, while I wish we would do more of holding our little lights high in the world, because I believe that we have a life-changing, life-giving way of approaching this world, we are not people who seek to convert others from their faith to ours. Unitarian Universalists tend to be active in interfaith and multi-faith movements because we believe that all religions, all of the world's religions, have something good to offer the world, and in many ways we have more in common, more that brings us together than that separates us.
Wonderful. I'd like to remind the audience you're listening to Wayne Parker and Kathy Smith, our guest on A Pause for Thought. Miss Smith
You can call me Kathy. It's fine.
Kathy is the Director of Family Ministries at the Unitarian Church here in Baton Rouge. And if you'd like to call in and ask her questions or challenge either of us, 343-9927, 343-9927. Kathy, getting back to try to get us back to children's or religious education for our young folk in the church. And, you know, I'm not implying that you got us off track. I've been asking questions. But regarding religion, your definition of it, how generally Unitarians, Universalists view it. Tolstoy, I don't know if you've read much of Leo Tolstoy's religious writings.
Not much, but some.
No, he wrote a lot of good ones, and he was a Christian. But one of his statements that he liked to say was, all true religions are personal. Mm-hmm. And what he meant was, he defined religion as how each of us understands creation, ourselves, our place in it, and then how we should behave accordingly. And if it's your religion, you're living it. If you're living it, it's your religion. But of course, if you're not living it, it's not your religion. And so in that regard, is that similar to the way we approach religious education in the church? As far as...
Short answer, yes.
Okay. So how do you approach religious education at the church for the children, for youth, and all of our young people?
We approach it, first of all, it's a process of teaching what it is to be a Unitarian Universalist. What are our principles? What do we stand for? We stand for and we believe in treating people with respect and with compassion. We believe that everyone should have a vote in things that concern them. We believe that there should be a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. We believe that we are continuously learning and that we go on a personal journey to find truth and meaning for ourselves, but that we do it in community so that we can check our assumptions with other people that we admire and respect. And we believe that we value the interdependent web of existence, of which we are all a part. And so those are what we teach our kids. We teach them by telling them stories of famous Unitarian Universalists and other men and women who teach us to meet the challenges of evil with courage and love. We teach them by telling them stories from the world's religions, because we believe that all religions have truth to offer. There are many paths to the top of the mountain, as they say. We do it by teaching stories rooted in the Jewish and Christian heritage, because our religion grew out of the Christian faith, which grew out of the Jewish faith. So we teach the stories from the Bible as stories that are foundational to our faith, in conjunction with stories from many of the other world's religions. And we also teach the power of the personal experience, both the power of the personal experience of wonder and awe. And we all have sat in awe when we look at the stars in the night sky, or when we look at a tadpole that is going to become a frog somehow. There is wonder and mystery for all of us. Or we teach the power of the personal experience in doing. There is great power in doing something to help other people, whether it is role-playing, how you will stand up to a bully on the playground, or getting a group of people together to plant flowers to help the environment, or going with a group of families to work at the local food bank. Those are all ways that we teach our faith.
Okay, we teach it by doing it, really, by example, right?
Correct.
But in the classrooms with the students, now I'll share a little bit of my experience with our church and religious education. I worked with the middle youth several years ago, and I loved it. I mean, I love all of our kids, but the middle youth and the older youth. Number one, I realized while I was working with them, or co-leading or whatever, that they're like 30 years ahead of where I was at their age. And of course I was raised in a particular off-the-shelf religion, and I confined my thinking about religion to those limits until I finally reached an age where I began questioning things, which took too long. But one of the things we did with the middle youth is we would share different stories from different religions, different perspectives, and ask them what they think. Mm-hmm. And one thing I noticed, something I started, but when they graduate from middle youth, they now, those who want to, are invited to come up and answer questions based on what they learned for the past year, and come in front of the whole congregation and show them. And show them what they've learned. This is the sort of thing we have been thinking about, and this is my personal answer to this question: is there a God? That kind of thing. And to me, that's wonderful for the adults, and I think it's wonderful for the children, because they get to be reaffirmed that whether people agree with them or not, it's pretty impressive that kids their age are thinking about these sorts of things and can really talk about them. To me, that just fascinated me. But getting back to the learning and growing with the younger children now, I noticed, it might have been last week or the Sunday before, we encourage them to trust in their understanding of the way things are, and to believe their own ideas.
So that, for instance, when we are talking about a story, we did a story at Easter time that talked about different ways of celebrating Easter with eggs. But a piece of that story had to do with the death of the old woman who had taught these children how to do eggs in her Ukrainian style. And it got us off on a conversation about what happens when you die and what happens after you die. And in our little cluster of, I think it was 7 children, we had a wide...
What age was this?
This would have been 3 to 8.
Wow, okay.
3 to 10.
Okay. The group.
And, the group, yes, that group.
Yeah.
The elementary age group. And in this little group of kids, between kindergarten age and 5th grade, mostly, we had a wide range of answers, from nothing happens after you die, to there's a heaven, to you go live with the angels, and to I don't know what happens, I haven't figured it out yet. And one of the things that I noticed is that they listened to each other with great respect. Nobody contradicted anyone else or laughed at them. And the other thing that I noticed is that those answers were all very individual to them. Some of it was what their parents had told them, and some of it was what they had thought up for themselves or thought about themselves. And that because those answers were theirs, they were more able to share them, and they were more comfortable with them. It's an example of who and how we are. And really, in guiding that conversation, I did a lot of listening, and I affirmed that Unitarian Universalists don't have one answer to what we call the big existential questions. Where were we before we were born? Where do we go when we die? What is the nature of the divine? All of those are questions that are, by their very nature, personal. We have our answers to them based on our experiences and our sense of what is right and true for us.
Okay, and based on a lot of this, from what I've seen, the children within our church, and I can't speak for children in other churches, they may be the same, but they have the self-confidence of thinking for themselves and voicing their thoughts because of the way they were raised, and because they are in the environment they're in now at the church. Chances are their parents have been in the church too, or have thought along the same lines with the same view of life without knowing that the Unitarian Universalist, the church existed. I mean, that was me. I didn't realize I was a Unitarian. I didn't realize how long I'd been a Unitarian until I read A Chosen Faith after I joined the church, and I was like, holy smokes, I've been, this is what I've been for 20 years. But anyway, where was I going with that? The kids are allowed to think for themselves, and they're confident in that. It's gone.
Age-appropriate spiritual development, is that perhaps where you were going?
Let's go with the mechanics of that, yes. So that's also, no, that's interesting. It's good, because actually reading your little deal here about how, the research behind how to approach educating children in any regard, I'm surprised. Maybe I'm looking at the ages incorrectly here, but I'm surprised that the kids that you're talking about, the elementary school kids, are talking about things like that already.
I think kids think about and talk about more than adults give them credit for.
Oh, I learned that with our middle youth. You betcha.
I think that children who grow up in an environment where they're able to talk freely and ask questions and explore, whether that be a family or a church, are more comfortable doing so.
Yes.
But I think all children do. When we were talking about age-appropriate development, you had asked about at one point, how do children grow spiritually? What do you mean when you talk about spiritual development? And just as we can point at intellectual stages, a child is ready to read when, and a child is not ready to read before this point, or physical stages of development. There's a fairly predictable schedule on which a child will walk, talk, etc. There is a fairly predictable schedule or progression that people follow in their spiritual development. If you're looking at an infant, their primary spiritual question is there love in the world? Am I going to be taken care of? So in infancy, that's the question we answer. If when you're working with a young child, a preschooler, the question is, what is church? Church is what my family does. It's all about the family when you are looking at a preschooler, ages 3 to 6. When you're looking at a younger elementary child, elementary age, it's all about learning the stories of our tribe, because church is what my church does. It's learning what the rituals are. It's learning in our church what a chalice lighting is, what some of our common hymns are. And then you go through a stage where my church is the best church ever. You have totally bought into it and are very excited about it because this is home. This feels right. It's been a loving place. It's taught me my stories. And then when you hit middle school, developmentally speaking, when you hit early adolescence or mid-adolescence, you come to a point where you begin to question. And this is a really natural point that all children go through, although not all children feel free to express it. But there is a pushback. Could this story be literally true, or is it metaphorically true? Do I really believe that this value is one that I want to live my life by, or is it one that has meaning for somebody else? And that is a questioning, probing, doubting stage, and we all need to go through it, because out of that doubting stage comes the next place, which is, I am confident that this religion, whatever religion it is, whether it be the faith of my fathers or whether it be the religion that I have chosen for myself, these answers are mine. They feel right to me. And beyond that, as you go further down the path, there comes a realization. If you are a deep thinker and if you keep going, there comes a place where you realize that there is a universality to almost all religion, that there is an underlying core of love for your fellow man, of holding yourself to your highest ideals, of living with compassion, that runs through all of the world's religions, and that there is a universality of thought. Forest Church, one of our ministers, expressed it as a cathedral, that we stand in a mighty cathedral with many rooms, some of which are dusty and closed off, some of which are bustly and busy, some of which have stained glass windows and others more clear windows, and some of which are cluttered with skeletons, and others of which have the light of future progress. But we stand inside this cathedral. The light is outside, and we only see what shines through to the room that we are in. It does not mean that the light does not surround the entire cathedral. And that is a really good summation, I think, of how that universal view of religion is.
Yeah, it also echoes Houston Smith's comments in his book, The World's Religions. Mm-hmm. In fact, he has what we call the Golden Rule, what many Christians and other people call the Golden Rule: do unto others as you would have them, that kind of thing. But that's across the cover of the book, even though it's talking about all the different major religions in the world, and that's true. Mm-hmm. And reaching a point where you can see the commonality or the universal connection of everything really was an epiphany for me. But it didn't happen until I was 30 years old. But I was raised differently. I wasn't given the confidence and the confidence to ask questions openly, mm-hmm. because it just didn't work for me in my family. But mm-hmm. It's good. Go ahead.
One of the central things that and I love it. I've learned it when I came to this church because it is central to this church. The peace stones that sit in our front yard, our front area next to our parking lot, our minister named them years ago as "Fear Less, Love More."
Yes.
And I love that because it is a very good synopsis of what Unitarian Universalism is about. We are not a religion that teaches fear. We are a religion that teaches love. And other religions sometimes use fear as the stick and love as the carrot. We tend to not have the stick and focus very much on the carrots.
Yes. Well, actually, you just reminded me of a book I read years ago, but as an adult. It's been long enough for me to say I was an adult a long time ago, but Neil Donald Walsh, are you familiar with him at all? He wrote a series of books that he titled Conversations with God, and I don't read series of books like that because after the first one, I find that they're trying too hard. But the first book I read, the first, one of the series, he made the observation that there are two emotions that drive all human beings: fear and love. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was so profound. I think that is really true. You look at all the unpleasant behaviors people exhibit: greed, violence, anger, all these things. They're all I think they can all be traced back to fear. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you see someone who's easygoing and accepts people and just rolls with things as they are, they love life. Mm-hmm. They're not afraid of anything.
Mm-hmm. I think that's absolutely true.
I do want to remind the listeners we have about 4 minutes left in the show. You can call in and talk with Kathy Smith, the Director of Family Ministry at the Unitarian Church, 343-9927, 343-9927. You mentioned spiritual development, and I know our ministers often make reference to spirit or spiritual. What is that? I've always had a problem with spirit, because to me I was raised with the image of a spooky translucent thing that floated in the air that was and went around scaring people or whatever.
And I would define your spirit as that which makes you you. There is, when you look at human beings, we are intellectual, we are emotional, we are physical, but there is something in us that is different from the intellectual, emotional, or spiritual. And I'm sorry, intellectual, emotional, or physical. Yeah. And I would say that realm is the realm of the spirit. It is what makes us compassionate. It is what calls us to be our best selves. It is what connects us with that which lies outside of us, whether it be the music of the spheres, the music of a beautiful orchestra or a choir, or the feeling of community that you get working with a group of people. Those are all things that speak to that thing that isn't emotional, electoral, or physical. It is your spirit.
The first time at the time an agnostic, I think, I had long ago, at that point, shrugged off the religion I was raised with, my concept of God from that. But the first time I experienced what I really could say to people and did, this is where God is, was after a group of adults in a Unitarian fellowship on the Mississippi Gulf Coast where I was. The sermon was finished, and we traditionally had just a discussion about the sermon and what we learned, what we got from it, we shared our thoughts. Mm-hmm. And it was so wonderful to see all these people, and there, maybe there's 15 of us, but we were all animated, we were all sharing our perspectives and saying, "Oh yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that kind of thing," and I thought, this is just wonderful. This is the way people should be all the time. And that's when it occurred to me that this is where God is. Mm-hmm. And however you define, God, mm-hmm. it's where we are all one together. And
God is the name that we humans put on the thing that is too big for us to describe.
Yes, it is ineffable. Mm-hmm. So I love that word. But mm-hmm. And as the listeners here would tell you, if anybody had bothered to call, I like using 50-cent words. But fortunately, no one's ever called to ask me to define what I was saying. But anyway, well, any other comments you'd like to make? We've got about 45 seconds. But who's counting?
Only the listeners and the people who run the show. Only that I am very, very delighted to be in this city and this place, that I love my church and I love my faith, and I am so glad to be working in it. And if you walk away from this with anything, I hope that you walk away with the feeling that in life it is a good thing to fear less and love more.
Very good. And question as much as you can. I
Yes.
know when I finally figured out that I didn't know much, I was excited because the whole world just suddenly opened up to me. It's like, wow, I don't have to explain anything. I could just say what I think and learn something new. And
Think of all the